Welcome everybody to, is this our fourth one now, Josh? Our fourth weekly edition of
fourth edition.
I love it. Time flies when we're doing this. But yeah, this is our fourth week in a row. We're going to talk some Big Ten. This one is going to be a little different because Indiana only has that Penn State game this upcoming weekend, and then they're off until the next time we're on. So we're going to fill some time with some other Big Ten stuff, something that we haven't done before, but we're looking forward to it. It should be a lot of fun, and we want to get your opinion on Twitter. So hit Twitter if you can. Tweet at us at M_Dugan44, at Josh Eastern, or at the Assembly Call. We'll let you know when that time comes, what you should tweet and when. But until then, Josh, Indiana still has a game to play. Even though it is Penn State, it's a Big Ten game. And I know we talked about this a little bit this week, and this is a big game coming off of that huge victory last night in Ann Arbor. And Penn State's not really a competent team. They're not your typical Big Ten team this year. But regardless, they're a Big Ten team, like I said, and they deserve respect, and that's what they're going to get from the Hoosiers because Indiana gives everyone their all, whether it's Minnesota in the final minute or Michigan for 40 minutes last night. But how they're going to beat Penn State is fairly straightforward. It's nothing like what it took last night to get by Michigan, this crazy shooting performance, or what it took to beat Illinois earlier with probably the best offensive game that they've played in years. This one, they just have to focus on one or two guys and one or two aspects of the game. And that first thing is just crash the boards. Penn State as a team is outside of the top 250 teams in the entire country in rebounds per game, and they don't really have anyone who can hit the boards. Their leading rebounder is Brandon Taylor, who's a 6'6" forward, and that's going to call for Troy Williams to shut him down on the board. So a shot goes up, look for Williams to block him out and get in front of that because their centers really can't hit the boards. This guy's they're really their only option in terms of rebounding. So Troy Williams has to step up, and as a team, they have to crash the boards because they dominate the game. They should dominate the game in terms of rebounding from the get-go, but you still have to show up and do it. So a very, very basic key for this one, just show up, rebound, play your game. That's what I got for the first one, and I'm calling out Troy Williams to step up and completely box out Brandon Taylor.
Yeah, Troy Williams did get in foul trouble last night against Michigan, so it'll be interesting to see what he comes back with, especially on the defensive side of the floor. But my first key to this one is just be ready to go right away. This is a late start on the road, 8 o'clock Eastern start. It's in Penn State. It's not like a big game. It's just every game's a big game, but this is just at Penn State. It's a team that's at the bottom of the Big Ten. Just don't lose focus. Ready to go. I want to see a fast start from this team and prove that Michigan blowout was no fluke. Prove that you belong. And with another big win on the road, especially on the road at Penn State, you can assert yourself in the Big Ten and validate what you did on Tuesday. And then my last point on this is a classic sleeper game. You're coming off a big road win where you went on a 28-0 run at one point, and this is a game where maybe You'll lose focus for a little bit just because it's on the road, because it's a late game. But what Indiana cannot do is get behind early and have to work back like they did, although they did do a fairly good job of that last night when they got down early. But in this game against Penn State, they have nothing to lose. And Indiana, if Penn State is able to hang around, that'll bode for Indiana. I don't think this will be a very tough game for them. But just put it away early and move on to Iowa all the way on next Thursday.
Money. And, the third one kind of relates back to what I was just talking about. Who did I say their leading rebounder was? Brandon Taylor. Take a guess at who their leading scorer is. It's Brandon Taylor. Again, this is on Troy Williams, most likely if he's going to be on him. But we need to stop Brandon Taylor if we're Indiana because he's their guy. He shoots 44%. Over 30 minutes per game, but he turns it over also offensively. So he's not their leader in minutes, but he is by a handful of points their leading scorer and their best shooter by far in terms of, this guy, he shoots with regularity and he's not the guy that comes off the bench, goes 5 for 5 and then 2 for 3 and his shooting percentage is, way too high and inflated. He is their guy offensively. He's probably their most effective guy and will be the one to take over a game late if and only if it is close, which it shouldn't be, because I expect Troy Williams or Robert Johnson or whoever's on him, maybe even OG, to shut him down offensively on the reboundings, that makes sense. Rebounding and scoring. That's what they need to do just to stop Brandon Taylor. And if they stop Brandon Taylor, they'll stop Penn State. Like I said, he's their guy, good shooter, plays most of the game, not as much as Yogi will play. But, he'll be in there for a large portion of the game. But if they can just slow him down, hold him to 15 or so, this game will be over. I am so confident in it. And they just have to stop him. That's it. I can't emphasize that almost enough. And it seems kind of like a jinx to say that, because it's one guy and this is Big Ten basketball. But if they slow him down and the offense performs even close to how they expect to perform, this game will be in their control almost the entire way.
Yeah, I mean, this Penn State team really does not have too many weapons. It's basically Brandon Taylor, and besides that, not really much else. They did hang with Michigan, though, at Madison Square Garden last Saturday, so maybe they'll be hanging their hat on that. And I believe they're playing Iowa at Iowa tonight. So we'll see how they fare in that one. I don't think it'll be that close of a game. Iowa at home. Got to be looking fairly good. But for picks to click in this game, I'm going with Colin Hartman because he's been on a track probably going down a little bit. But in this last game last night against Michigan, I think he played the best game he's played in the last couple weeks. And that's not saying too much, but I think he's starting to turn a corner. We were talking about roller coasters of a season on the postgame show on Saturday, and I think this is kind of that roller coaster of a season for Colin Hartman. And now he was at that valley, but maybe now he's starting to go a little bit back up, and that'll really help this Hoosiers team, especially on the defensive side of the floor, where he can play some fairly good defense. And if he can get his 3-point shot back like he did a little bit last night, that'll definitely help the Hoosiers. So I'm looking for him to have a big game Saturday night at Penn State.
And it's interesting because on Saturday and even last week, you and I were on Hartman and Zeisloff like we haven't been on anyone all year. And they played all right last night. They didn't play well Saturday, but they played all right last night. They hit a couple open shots, and I would that's their role on this team is to hit a couple of open shots and create a couple shots and find someone cut into the basket. And they haven't really done a great job of that lately. But they certainly showed progress last night, and it was a step above the last handful of games. So that matchup will be very interesting, and we'll see how Hartman progresses because he will be an X factor at some point this season, whether that's in the NCAA tournament or when Purdue and Maryland come to town or Iowa. We have no idea, but he will be an X factor, and Indiana will not succeed if he does not go forward improving his game and play a little bit more like he played last night compared to how he played against teams like Minnesota. However, I think you know where I'm going with this. My pick to click is Troy Williams. I've already said it all. Like I said, Brandon Taylor, our only guy. He can score. He can get rebounds. Troy needs to get on him, box him out, which he's very capable of doing. Beat him a couple times, maybe get him into foul trouble, take a charge, or force him to foul you, and then just stop him from scoring. Troy's pretty long. He's a good defender. He's fast. Stay in front of him. Force him to take jump shots from the elbow if he's on a drive. Force him to fade away if he's down low. Get up in him and make him earn these baskets because he will score, but Troy needs to limit Brandon Taylor in terms of how many points he scores.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about Brandon Taylor. I mean, he is the one guy for Penn State that will help this team win or will help this team lose. It really falls on him, and it depends if he goes off for 30 points, maybe Penn State has a chance. If Indiana holds them to maybe 10 to 15, I don't know if Penn State will even keep it close, but it is a road game, and it is one of those sleeper games, so I guess you just never know, especially in the Big Ten.
Yeah, exactly. And Brandon Taylor the last couple games has been completely hot and cold. Completely hot and cold. Michigan the other night, he played 37 minutes, was 11 of 19 shooting, and had 24 points and 10 boards. Game before that, Ohio State played 32 minutes in a 20-point loss. He was 5 of 16 shooting for 11 points and 2 rebounds. 2 games before that, at Northwestern, a good win for them, 19 points on the road, 7 boards. Off just 5 of 13 shooting, he got to the line 6 times. That's pretty good. Looking at his numbers, if you go down his stat sheet, he doesn't get to the free throw line a terrible amount. He's not Nigel Hayes, or Yogi Ferrell. He doesn't get to the line more than 4 or 5 times, sometimes 6, but 4 or 5 times a game. Against Ohio State, he didn't get to the line earlier in the year. At Maryland, he didn't get to the line. He played almost the full game. But he's had trips. He's had games where he's had more than 10 trips, double-digit trips to the line. So just don't worry about not fouling him like Nigel Hayes. He's not going to take 40 free throws this weekend. He's not. But he will burn you, and he will earn his points because he's going to score them from the field, and that's what could torch Indiana. So they need to work on stopping him, and that's really what it's going to boil down to. But this is a game of more proportion than just the win, because they still need to keep building off this win against Michigan, off that awful performance against Minnesota and that loss at Wisconsin. So this trajectory needs to keep going up. It's looking good right now after last night, but it needs to keep going up. And it's going to start with Troy Williams and Colin Hartman, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, those are the two players Indiana can kind of rely on in this game, because I don't think you're going to need Yogi Ferrell to go out and score 30 points. I don't think you're going to need Thomas Bryant to have a 23-8 game like he did Saturday. But this is a game where maybe more role players will have the chance to step up. Maybe OG Anunoby finally gets in the starting lineup like we've been wanting to see, and maybe Colin Hartman comes off the bench, and maybe that actually helps Colin Hartman have a big game. But who knows? We'll see what Tom Crean devises, and it is Penn State, so maybe you can mix it up a little bit.
And I think this is the longest we've gone without mentioning OG. It's been 12 minutes, and we finally said his name. We haven't called him the next Victor Oladipo yet, or we haven't been praising him for that incredible breakaway and one he had last night, or a great defensive stop. It's been 12 minutes. I'm very impressed with us. But let's talk about him for just a second. What did you see, if anything, last night that impressed you even more than his previous 3 or 4 games? Because every time he steps on the floor, to me, it seems like something special is about to happen.
Yeah, I mean, he has one of those steals and breakaway dunks that it feels like every game that he plays, and he just continues to impress. It doesn't always show up in the stat book, although he did have 11 points, but he just does those little things so well. He's one of those glue guys, as Dan Dockich was calling him last night. He's just one of those glue guys that'll help Indiana move to that next level wherever they need to go. He is the guy to help Indiana do that, whether it's on the defensive side of the floor, whether it's knocking down a big bucket, whether it's getting to the line, whether it's offensive rebounding. It's just, I feel like he can do anything for this team to help them win. And in the long run, that's going to be so important for Indiana. And it'll also be cool if Dan Dockich names his kid OG, like he keeps harping on ESPN.
Okay, yeah, I mean, he's got a lot to say about the Hoosiers, especially OG, and he did last night. That's no lie. But going forward, this kid, I just fear that obviously it'd be nice for him to break out at some point soon, just, to have a player like that just come out of his shell and be what he can be. But at the same time, we don't want him to peak too early, because then there may be the pressure on him. He may not, go forward and progress as well as he should. But at this point right now, I'm loving what I'm seeing, because he's not turning heads across the nation. He may not even be turning heads across the Big Ten. I mean, maybe if you're in the arena, like if you were in Chrysler Arena last night and you saw him play, you're like, oh, that OG kid is a freshman, pretty good. Like, he could be something. But in Bloomington, we know he's going to be something. And I love the fact that everyone down here can have something in their back pocket that the rest of the conference and country doesn't quite know about. But they'll hear about him soon. Because to me, my claim, if he could be the next Victor Oladipo-like player, I'm so confident in that. Usually those picks or predictions are the kiss of death when they come out of my mouth, but I'm very confident in this. You can trust me, and I don't say that every time I make a prediction like this. This kid will be special and could be cream and crimson legend by the time he's done. Not to the ranks of, Calvert Chain or Isaiah Thomas or whatever, but I'm telling you, this guy could be something. Maybe one of the best players this decade has seen in Assembly Hall.
Yeah, I mean, Jared, I think, tweeted out some numbers to compare Victor Oladipo and OG Anunoby, and they were very similar, with maybe even given the upper hand to OG Anunoby, because he, I think, like 1.3 more rebounds per 40 minutes. But I mean, the comparisons are definitely there. They're two very similar players, but I think what sets OG Anunoby apart is his wingspan. I mean, Victor Oladipo may have had a big wingspan. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but a 7'2" wingspan is massive. I mean, you can do so much with that, and he's so athletic, and I think he already broke the Indiana record for squatting in the weight room as a freshman. I mean, that's incredible right off the bat, coming in here, not even a full season in. And I mean, he's turning heads all around Bloomington, and the Big Ten better watch out, because if he's not on scouting reports soon, Indiana will be licking their chops a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like you said, this kid's breaking records in the weight room. He's a big dude, and he's so freakishly athletic at the same time. I mean, he's a thick guy. He can bulk you down and get down low and make a move on you and beat you to the hoop. He can outrun you. He can outmuscle you. He can literally do it all, and I can't wait for him to break out of his shell. We're going off on a little bit of a tangent here, so we're going to try and steer ourselves back onto the road. Proceed as normal. It's now time for predictions, as we do every time. We got the Indiana game, and then we've got 3 marquee games in the Big Ten this week until we go on next. Plus, Josh has another upset pick that may surprise you. We'll get to that after we're done talking about this IU game. I assume that we have a similar mindset going into this one as we did going into Minnesota. Josh, I'll come out and say it. I've got Indiana by double digits. I don't know about you. It's a road game. You said it's a possible trap game, but what happens this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I think you probably nailed it. I don't see Indiana winning this by less than 10 points. I mean, I think they're going to run away with this thing. It's just on Brandon Taylor and what the defense does. If Brandon Taylor has a big game like he did against Michigan, maybe it'll be close until the end like it was against Minnesota, where Indiana kind of takes control in the second half, and then it's just kind of Minnesota trying to get back in it. But I don't really see this game being too close. Indiana's just playing too good basketball, especially coming off that game at Michigan. So I don't really see too much in this game.
Yeah, and I don't agree with you in the sense that they'll run away with it, because I don't think that they can duplicate that performance they had last night. If they do, great. I'd love to see it, but I just don't think that was an incredible game, and I've never seen them play like that on the road in a long time. I don't think they duplicate that. I think they could get out of there with a well-played first half, take the lead, and just maintain it, 12, 13, maybe 14-point win. I don't think they blow them out. I don't think, it's a 30-point game at any point. I don't think it's even a 20, 24-point game at any point. But I do think Indiana will control this game from start to finish and not go and knock everyone's socks off. But on the other hand, around the Big Ten, on the other hand, there will be some closer games, including Michigan State twice we have on our schedule. Purdue, I believe, more than once. Is that correct? I think so. And also Maryland. So let's get to these right now. Let's break these down, because this is a Big Ten Roundup show after all. We've got Purdue and Maryland. Josh, when is that game this week?
That's Saturday, 1 o'clock Eastern time.
Okay, Saturday at 1. Let's talk about it here. Wednesday at 6:50. Who do you have in this one and why?
Just because this game is at Maryland, I'm going to go with the Terrapins. They're just too good at home. They just beat Iowa coming in there a couple weeks ago. This team's really starting to get it together and really click. And they have probably, I think I mentioned this on last week's show, they have one of the highest ceilings in the entire country. I mean, this team has Melo Trimble, Rasheed Suleiman. I mean, you can just go down the list. I mean, their starting 5 is one of the best in the country, especially when you have a point guard like Melo Trimble. It's hard to beat a team like that, especially on the road, and that's why I got Maryland. Purdue is a good team. I don't think they played to their potential. I don't think they'll play to their potential on Saturday, but still kind of a work in progress for Purdue, and that's why I have Maryland in this one, especially at home.
Nailed it. And I don't think Purdue's reached their ceiling either. I think their ceiling is higher than where they are right now, but for some reason, they just haven't found that. And there is a limit to how good they can be, but they can be better than what they are right now. And what they are is 18th in the country. But they're not going to find that on Saturday. You're absolutely correct. Maryland wins this one. It's at home. They haven't lost at home yet, I don't believe. But like you said, Rasheed Suleiman, Melo Trimble, even Jake Layman. Jake Layman is the guy that will rip your heart out. Right when your team goes on an 8-0 run to get back into the game, this kid's going to bury a 3. That crowd's going to get crazy. It's going to be a 6-point game again, and you're down now 2 possessions at least, and you've got to go find a score with the crowd rocking. So Maryland wins this one. I think it's close, not that close, maybe 8 to 10 points, but like we said, Purdue just has not quite found it in what it takes to beat Maryland, a team like Maryland and Iowa. They may at some point, but I don't think it's this soon because they haven't really shown anything that's going to convince me otherwise. Going just a little bit north, the Battle of the Mitten State. Michigan State travels to Ann Arbor in a massive rivalry game. Going to be a little bit of sour taste in the Wolverines' mouths after that football matchup earlier back in October. Now they got a battle on the hardwood, and we'll see if Sparty can pull out the win here. I'll take the lead on this one. I like Michigan State. Is Karis LeVert coming back that game? We don't know. But to me, it doesn't matter. They won't win either way. It's too much of a trap game for a team like Tom Izzo and Michigan State to go in there and think, oh, no one really thinks you're going to go in there and think, oh yeah, we got it. It's Michigan. They're not that big of a deal. They're our little brothers now. Whatever. Whether or not Karis LeVert comes back, Michigan State will be ready to play. And Denzel Valentine has been back for a handful of games now, and they look crisp. And it started with that hot shooting night at Northwestern a week or so ago, and it just kept rolling, including this weekend against Rutgers, I believe. Two not great opponents, I'll give you that, but no one in the country, and no one in the Big Ten, that goes without saying, is really blowing out teams with consistency that they should, other than Indiana earlier in the year and maybe even last night. But Michigan State is starting to do that now. And I'm not saying they're going to go win and blow out Michigan because they should win that game. They will win that game. I think they do, whether or not Karis LeVert is back, because Denzel Valentine has found his stroke. He's shooting well. They're shooting well as a team. And I think they could start their run now and perhaps win out on the season and enter back as a number 1 seed, maybe even number 1 overall. I think they are white hot right now and a force to be reckoned with. I am scared to play Michigan State whenever that game were to come up, whoever I am in the Big Ten. Michigan State's got it going on right now, and I don't think they're looking back.
Yeah, I mean, with that win against Maryland, I think it was last week, 2 weeks ago, I think that really is going to turn around their season. But in this game against Michigan, it's on the road, and I'm going to go with, if Karis LeVert is back for Michigan, I'm going to pick Michigan. If he does not play, I'm picking Michigan State, just because if Karis LeVert is back, this is a rivalry game. LeVert is going to be fired up. The crowd's going to be fired up. Their best players back on the floor. It's going to be a great matchup with him against Valentine. And I think Michigan, just because they just got blown out against Indiana on their home floor and because they get Karis LeVert back, I think that would push them to a victory. But if he does not play, this Michigan team just, I don't think, has enough weapons to compete with Michigan State, especially at the level that they're playing right now. But if LeVert does come back, I think Michigan comes away with a win. And I actually also want to clarify that Purdue-Maryland game is 4 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Pacific. So there you go.
All right, 4 o'clock. You'll probably be watching that one, rooting for the Terrapins. But, yeah, like you said about Michigan, if Karis LeVert's not back, it would take something absolutely catastrophic for Michigan State to lose that game. They're just too good, and Michigan doesn't really have enough without him. We saw it last night. I'm sure everyone listening to this did see that game last night. Michigan just doesn't really have enough. I mean, with Spike Albrecht not playing that well, not playing, they just don't have anything, And this is just a different Michigan team than we've seen in years past. And without Karis LeVert, they're nothing, really, to me. And I don't think they get that win, regardless of who's on the floor, dressed in maize and blue. But moving on, this one is where it gets interesting. Michigan State at Purdue in Lafayette next Tuesday. So 6 days from right now. Josh, let's get into this one. Who do you have Michigan State at Purdue?
This is a tough one. I mean, I've been going back and forth with these two teams because they're so good in their respective ways. I mean, Michigan State has their huge playmaker in Denzel Valentine, and then Purdue has they have 3 towers. They have 3 7-footers, and I don't know if Matt Costello and Michigan State are going to be able to keep up with that, but at the same time, will Denzel Valentine counter against those 3 big guys? This is just such a good matchup in different ways. But because this is at Purdue, and I do like what Michigan State is doing, and they're playing great basketball, I think I'm going to go with Purdue in this one just because they're at home. This is 2 tough road games in a row for Michigan State. I think they'll go 1-1 with a win let me rephrase this. If Karis LeVert plays, like I just said, Michigan State is going to lose that one. Here we go. They're going to go 1-1 in these 2 games. I don't think they will beat Purdue if they beat Michigan and vice versa. So they're going to go 1-1 in these 2 games. I don't know if Purdue will be able to keep up with Denzel Valentine in that scoring, but at the same time, if Karis LeVert's back for Michigan, I think that'll influence what Michigan State does Tuesday night at Purdue.
Interesting way to look at it. I can hear what you're saying, but I think Purdue wins this one too. And I know earlier, just 5 minutes ago, I said that Purdue doesn't have it yet, what it takes to beat Maryland, but Michigan State's not Maryland. Yes, they're shooting well, and yes, they've got their stride back, but they're not Maryland. They don't have the scoring options that Maryland has. No matter what you think, it's a fact. They don't have the scoring options Maryland has. They don't have the guard play that Maryland has. And Diamond Stone is one heck of a center. So Michigan State can't even really match up to that. Yes, Denzel Valentine is very elusive and versatile, and he can do it all. But he can't make up for what Maryland's got. And Purdue has enough to beat Michigan State at home. I truly believe that they can use their three-headed monster in the paint to their advantage. And they're starting to click a little bit right now. Again, have not found their stride. So don't even think for a second I'm saying that, because they're far from that. But they're starting to click a little bit. And on a Tuesday night, big-time performances come in big games. And they need one very soon. They need one next Tuesday. It'd be a perfect time to do it. Second week of February. I think Purdue gets that upset. They defeat Michigan State and maybe start a little run towards the end of the regular season. I don't know. It depends on how they play. But I think that Michigan State goes in there and comes back with a loss after that tough road game at Michigan that I believe they will win.
Yeah, I mean, these are all great matchups that are coming after kind of a lull of a week for Big Ten basketball. Now we're kind of hitting that stretch again where there's going to be big games night in and night out, and it's going to be exciting. But on Tuesday, because Maryland has a week off, they scheduled Bowie State, which is kind of interesting. I was looking at the schedule. I was like, why in the heck do they have Bowie State? But if you're wondering why Maryland scheduled Bowie State, it's because they have a whole week off. And I was looking at that. It was like, who is Bowie State? We're still not sure who Bowie State is. They're a school of 5,000 in Maryland. So you got that to look forward to if you want to pay for that on BTN Plus on, I believe, Tuesday night. But my upset pick this week, I'm going to go off the radar a little bit, off the radar of ranked teams. We're going to go to the bottom of the Big Ten. Minnesota traveling to Evanston to play Northwestern. Now, I know Michael can't say anything about Northwestern, so I'll take that over. But I'm going to pick Minnesota in this game because Minnesota has been playing some great basketball of late. Now, they haven't gotten wins, and they haven't won in the Big Ten yet. They're 0-10, but something has got to give eventually. And I think Thursday night, tomorrow night, is going to be the night that they finally break through. They've been so close. I think the past 4 or 5 games have all been within single digits, and I think they're finally ready to break through and get a win. Joey King, Nate Mason will power the Golden Gophers to an upset win in Evanston and put a big dent on Northwestern's tournament resume. I'm sorry about this, Michael.
Now, I am a man. I pride myself in following what I say. I'm a man of my word, and this is one of the final shows of my suspension, so I'm not going to say a word about that team. We're just going to casually move on, but I wanted to make something clear. You are not picking Bowie State over Maryland, are you? That was just a little, perhaps was that an Appalachian State, Michigan little teaser right there, or was that a complete just in case if you were wondering why Maryland is playing this team?
That was just more of a if you were wondering. There's no way Maryland's going to lose that game.
I'll tell you what, if they lose that game, I'm going to throw away everything that I think I know about Big Ten basketball this year and in my 16 years of watching Big Ten basketball. If they lose, I won't even know what to say, but I can't even believe we're talking about this right now. So let's move on. And this is where we're changing it up a little bit, and this is where we're going to have some fun. So if you're listening live, if you're listening on the podcast, if you're watching the replay on YouTube or on our Assembly Call post-game page, we encourage you to tweet at us anything that you have to say, anything that you're thinking, anything that you agree, disagree with. Whenever you're watching this, tweet at us. We've got our Twitter handles right here. If you're watching, you can see it's at @M_Dugan44, at Josh Eastern, or at Assembly Call. We'd love to see what you have to think because we are going to talk about the Big Ten as a whole, and Indiana right now is a little midseason report. So we're going to do some Big Ten report cards, some MVPs, some Freshmen of the Year, and we're going to have some fun with this, and we want your opinion. So hit Twitter. Let us know what you think, what we're wrong on, what we're right on, what we missed, what we talked about that you like to hear. Anything, let us know. We'd absolutely love to hear from you. So let's get this going right now. And this may be an obvious question. I think I know who you're going to say for this one, Josh, but who is your MVP so far midway through the Big Ten season for the Hoosiers?
I think it has to be Yogi Ferrell. I mean, there's nobody else on this team that would have this team where they are right now. I mean, Yogi Ferrell has been the glue that's put this team together. He's been the scorer. He's been the facilitator. He's been the leader. I mean, he has just been everything that this program and team needs this season to have them where they are at the top of the Big Ten, coming off a double-digit road win at Michigan. I mean, that you don't see that every year. I mean, 5 of the last 7 games have been within single digit, or I think have been within 5 points between Indiana and Michigan. And I mean, Yogi Ferrell has just been exactly what this program embodies, and he's the MVP. I mean, there's not much more to say about it. Just Yogi Ferrell is just Yogi Ferrell, and he's the MVP so far.
Now, I will give you that Yogi Ferrell is the best player on this team. No doubt about that. He's a game changer. He's got it all. He's the all-time assist leader. He can score at will. However, there is a difference, and I have been an advocate for this for years, because when people disagree with it, it gets under my skin a little bit. And you're not completely wrong, so don't think you're getting under my skin right now. But there is a difference between most outstanding player and most valuable player. And to me, the most valuable player on this team is Thomas Bryant. Josh, let me ask you a question. I just said his name. Who is the big man for the Indiana Hoosiers, the starting big man?
Thomas Bryant.
Let me ask you another question. Who is the next big man in line for Indiana to make an impact on a game? Do you know?
Probably Max Bielfeldt.
Max Bielfeldt? Is he your traditional?
Max and his Cavs.
Is he your traditional Big Ten big man? Is he 6'10", 6'11"? Can he spin around guys and make these athletic plays at the rim and crash the boards and out-rebound everyone on the floor?
I mean, he can spin. I don't know if he's that big man, though, that you're talking about.
Exactly. He's not. He's not your big man. And this is what Indiana was missing last year going into the tournament and their struggles towards the end of the year. Their overload on guards and lack of big men caught up to them. Without Thomas Bryant, I don't even want to think about where this team would be. Yes, Max Bielfeldt has been outstanding this year. One of the more valuable players on this team, along with Thomas Bryant and Yogi Ferrell and maybe even Robert Johnson. Then I would go probably Bielfeldt, because he's come off the bench and impacted games immediately almost every single time. So I'm not discrediting what he's done this year, because he's been an outstanding addition to the team. But if he jumped into that starting role, this team would not be 19-4. They would not be 9-1 in the Big Ten. They'd be closer to 6-4 in the Big Ten, and maybe even 15-8 on the regular season. They'd be looking more of like not even a step below Purdue. I think they'd be the next team down below Purdue instead of on top of the entire conference right now without Thomas Bryant. He adds an entire dimension to their game that they haven't seen in years. Noah Vonleh didn't provide what Thomas Bryant is providing right now. I mean, I'm in love with the way this guy is playing and impacting the team, because he can grab rebounds. He's their emotional leader. I mean, he's absolutely crazy, and he's got more energy to go to spread throughout the entire team just in his 7-foot body. But he impacts the game in so many ways, on the boards, scoring, and even passing. And he can even dribble, too. He's put the ball on the floor and taken it coast to coast multiple times. He can impact the game at any time, and he doesn't play like a freshman at all. To think that he's a freshman and impacting games the way he is right now is outstanding. So to me, without him, this team is really a shell of what they are at this point. I think that he impacts this team in so many ways that they just can't recover from without him there.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with what you're talking about most outstanding player and most valuable player. I actually totally agree with you. And it's just a matter of opinion in that sense. But I guess the real question is, do you think Thomas Bryant's a green room guy, as ESPN likes to put it? But I mean, he's committed to staying 2 years. Hopefully he stays 2 years. I mean, he's been a great addition to this team this year. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and being the 2-year project that he says he is, he really is. Because as great as he is right now, you're not going to throw him into the gauntlet with Anthony Davis and guys like that. He's not ready for that. He's still great at the college level, but he's not even really dominant in the Big Ten. He's not even the best freshman big man. I think Diamond Stone is. But, yeah, like you said, 2-year project is the definition of what Thomas Bryant is as a player right now, because he came in with a lot of talent, not even really raw. It's been cooked a little bit, but it's not quite that crisp golden brown that you want it when a player leaves and ends his college or his collegiate career. I think he's well on the way to finding that, but the end of the yellow brick road is not this coming March. It's probably next March, and he would add an immense amount of value to this team next year if he were to stay like he has already this year. It would just be huge if he could come back next year like he says he will, but that's very forward thinking. But at this point in time, so far, subject to change come March, Thomas Bryant is the MVP of the Hoosiers. No doubt in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's Yogi Ferrell or Thomas Bryant. I don't think you can really argue for anybody else. But I mean, it'll be interesting to see what Thomas Bryant does going forward, because there are a lot of people saying, oh, he can break through and go to the NBA right now. But then there's also some others saying, oh, there's no way, and he's staying 2 years. And I think that's exactly what he should do. So I guess time will tell. That's all. That's all we can do.
Yeah, and I may be able to listen to an argument for Robert Johnson being one of the MVPs for this team, just because when Blackman went down, he's come in and played sensational. And he hasn't been great on the stat sheet, but he's played sensational on defense. I know I've said that pretty much every week, so I'm going to stop it right there. But, again, I'm not saying he's the MVP, but I would listen to you if you were telling me that he should be in consideration for one of the 2 or 3 teams' MVPs, because he absolutely has. But from IU to Big Ten, we're going to stay down the MVP route but change destinations. Midwest as a whole, Big Ten MVP, Freshman of the Year. What should we do first, Josh? You like the Freshman of the Year?
Yeah. Let's do Freshman of the Year. My Freshman of the Year so far, Diamond Stone of Maryland. I mean, this guy has added such a dimension to Maryland to go along with Robert Carter and Jake Layman. He is just that force inside that has been so good for them. He averages almost 13 points a game, 5.5 rebounds per game. He's shooting 57.1% from the floor. I mean, he's just so efficient on offense. He's been great on defense. He's such a big body inside. And just like Thomas Bryant, I mean, he's been a huge addition to his team. And I don't know if Maryland's a very good team. Do not get me wrong about that. I don't know if they'd be where they are without Diamond Stone, just because he's that one other guy that you got a game plan for, you got to match up against, and you got to deal with on a night in and night out basis. And he's just getting it done, and he is my Freshman of the Year.
And look at that. My IU MVP is a freshman, and your Big Ten freshman. Actually, you know what? That makes sense that your Big Ten Freshman of the Year is a freshman. But what I meant to say was we're talking about back-to-back freshmen impacting their teams in so many ways. That's the thesis of what I'm trying to get out, but I'm struggling with words tonight. But, yeah, absolutely right about Diamond Stone. But I'm going to transition you a little further west and north to find the real Freshman of the Year, who goes by the name of Ethan Happ for the Badgers. 12 points per game, little over 8 rebounds per game. He's shooting 55%. And you know how many double-doubles he has this year, Josh?
I do not.
7. He's got 7 double-doubles this year as a freshman in a new system. And the way he's transitioned into this really crazy roller coaster season for Wisconsin has been crazy. I mean, coach leaves and they struggle to find an identity after they lose opening night at home against Western Illinois. This kid's been there and he's performed night in and night out. And people forget, because it was the Nigel Hayes show against Indiana last week, this kid had 25 and 8 in an overtime game as a freshman. He impacted that game just as much as Nigel Hayes did. Nigel Hayes is used to having the lead in every single game. It's always the Nigel Hayes show when Wisconsin hits the floor. But this kid was right behind him. He had 25 and 8 in an overtime game. He was part of the reason they won that game. Can't deny that one. So this kid has been sensational to me. He's doing it all. He hasn't attempted a 3 all year. He's doing all of his scoring inside the three-point arc, inside of really 15 feet. He doesn't take a ton of jumpers. Shooting 55%. He's 8 rebounds, too. That's the number I can't get out of my head. 8 rebounds he's averaging as a 6'7" forward, I believe, in only 28 minutes a game. So he's playing pretty good minutes for a freshman. I mean, any freshman would love to play 28 minutes, but this kid's grabbing 8 boards and over 12 points a game. It's absolutely sensational. And what he's been doing for the Badgers in a time of need is remarkable. And I'm very impressed with how he's playing so far.
Yeah, and I think he's at least won Big Ten Freshman of the Year, Freshman of the Week. Twice at least. I mean, he is.
I think he's the most recent winner.
Yeah, I mean, I think he won it the week that Indiana played them as well. So I mean, this guy has been playing great basketball of late and really all season. I mean, you talk about all those numbers, and in a year when it's really just Nigel Hayes and Bronson Canning, he's been that third guy to step up and kind of help Wisconsin to where they are now. Now it's just 5-4 so far, but without Ethan Happ, I don't know where this Wisconsin team sits right now.
Yeah, I agree. Nigel Hayes can only take them so far. And Nigel Hayes is in consideration for Big Ten Player of the Year, I know, between us, but that's not who you picked. So why don't you tell us who you did pick for our Big Ten Player of the Year, Big Ten Most Valuable Player?
My most valuable player for the Big Ten right now comes from one of the best teams in the Big Ten, and that is Iowa and Jared Utoff. I don't know. I mean, I've been saying this for Diamond Stone as well and Yogi Ferrell. I don't know if Iowa is where they are without Jared Utoff, just because he comes in, takes over for Aaron White, who was one of their best scorers a year ago. Jared Utoff comes in, and he really hasn't missed a beat. He's averaging 18.6 points per game, 18.6 points per game, 6 rebounds, almost 3 blocks a game, shooting the ball 47% from the field and 46% from behind the arc. I mean, this guy has just been in all facets of the game. He has been a great player, and when he's not having a good game, they're going to lose, like he did against Maryland. I don't think he shot the ball more than 30% in that game, and he was just not very good. But then other games, he's going to come out and score at least 20 points, and Iowa's going to be running away with it. So this guy has just been – I mean, he's been really good for this Iowa team, and he's my MVP.
Yeah, and as much as I would love to disagree with you, I simply can't do it because Jared Utoff is the man in Iowa City. And unlike their football team, who also came out of nowhere and sprung to the top of the rankings and caught the country by complete surprise, this basketball team has a standout guy that can take over a game, and that's Jared Utoff. I mean, they've got Peter Jock, who can knock down threes, and he's pretty athletic, and he knows his way with the ball. He can get to the hoop, but no one's like Jared Utoff. He's incredibly versatile. He can knock down the three. He can get to the hoop. He can rise above and dunk over someone. He can hit the boards, which is almost 19 points a game. He's playing just about 30 minutes a game, so he's not even really on the floor all the time. But in terms of the value he adds to his team, you can't compare it to anyone. If you want to look at Melo Trimble from Maryland, I'll toss you Diamond Stone and Rasheed Suleiman, maybe even Jake Layman. For every Batman, there's a Robin. And for Iowa, they don't really have that Robin. They've just got a Batman and a half, really, in Jared Utoff. This guy is the real deal. And don't be turned off by the title Iowa forward Jared Utoff. And that, as we have in the past, Aaron White was a sensational player. Jared Utoff, again, is a sensational player. So don't be turned off by the fact that it's Iowa, and don't say that they haven't played anyone, because they have. And they've gotten a couple wins and also a couple of losses, but they've played teams and they've won games because of Jared Utoff. And he is the most valuable player to any team in the Big Ten, and it's almost impossible to disagree with. Maybe Denzel Valentine at Michigan State, but other than that, it's between those two, and I can't say no to Jared Utoff. So I can't disagree with you there. As much as I should to make this interesting, I can't. At this point in time, he is the MVP, and also because Denzel Valentine missed time. If he plays well throughout the stretch, we'll have a different conversation at the end of the year, and I'll take the other side. But right now, it's Jared Utoff.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe in a year without Ben Simmons and Buddy Hield, maybe we're talking about Jared Utoff in the discussion for National Player of the Year, but just because of what Simmons and Hield are doing right now, I don't think you can make that argument right now, and it's really just speaks to what Ben Simmons and Buddy Hield are doing, because what Jared Utoff is doing in one of the toughest conferences in the country is just crazy, and the fact that he's not even in it or in the discussion, it just speaks to what those other two are doing. But I mean, Jared Utoff in the Big Ten, I don't think there's much of an argument right now.
No, again, Denzel Valentine, Jared Utoff, and then everybody else. But let's get to our final segment, which is I'm very excited to get to this because this can be very, very fun. And again, if you're listening right now, if you're listening live, if you're listening on the podcast tomorrow, being Thursday, which I guess would now make it today, or if you're watching the replay on YouTube, please tweet at us anything that you'd like to say with this topic, because we want to have some fun with it. If we forgot people or teams, let us know. If the teams are ranked too high, let us know. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love hearing from you guys all the time, and please continue to give us feedback and insight about what you think from another fan's perspective. But right now we're going to talk about Big Ten report cards, and we're going to go with the top 8, just because the top 7, yes, mathematically is half of the Big Ten, but in both of our opinions and most people's opinions, the Big Ten is split in 2, not half, right at that 8 mark, right below Wisconsin, I believe, in the standings it is. Wisconsin and Ohio State, maybe. Not relevant because they're both in the top 8, but other than those 8, there's really no one else to talk about it. Rutgers, Minnesota, winless, terrible. They'll probably both go winless in the regular season. I know you disagree. You think Minnesota's chance is coming. Rutgers will not win a Big Ten game. Minnesota will win 1 or 2, but that's it. The other teams, Illinois, Northwestern, not really much to talk about there. So we're going to stick to the top 8. And Josh, why don't you lead us off with your first team in terms of your report card power rankings? Who is it? What grade did they get from you?
So at the top of my power rankings, I have at an A-, I got Iowa. I mean, I didn't really expect this team to do a whole lot this season, and they've come out and they've exceeded expectations. Now, they did go to Maryland and had a tough game there, but, I mean, that's at Maryland. That's one of the toughest places to play. But right now at the top, I got Iowa, and actually tied at the top, I got Indiana as well with an A-. They have played very well this year. And I don't know how they're tied for first in the Big Ten right now. I don't know why they shouldn't be at the top.
Yeah, I actually have Iowa above Indiana. I have Iowa at a solid A, and 97%, which is just a little bit short of an A plus because they did get that loss at Maryland. But they're still Iowa. They're still Iowa basketball, and they don't play a brand new game or brand of basketball. They're still Iowa. They still play Iowa basketball. Yes, Jared Uthoff is someone that they haven't really had in the past, but again, they're still Iowa. They have a ceiling. They can go very far in March in the tournament. Don't get me wrong, but they have a ceiling on them. They won't win it all. It's just not going to happen. They don't have it, but they are certainly a top 5 team in the country, I would say, probably at 4 or 5 just because of Jared Uthoff. Not just because, but largely because of Jared Uthoff. But they have a 97% on my report card. And just followed is Indiana with an A-. They don't really have a ceiling, in my opinion, which is weird. A team with a ceiling in Iowa is ranked higher than a team without a ceiling in Indiana. But the reason Indiana is lower is because they have not found out that they don't have a ceiling yet. This team can be as good as they want. They are not quite as talented as Maryland, but they're probably the next team in the conference. They're more talented than Iowa. They're not. I wouldn't go as far as to say they're better coached, but they're pretty evenly coached in terms of Indiana and Iowa. But they're just across the board much more talented. They don't have a Jared Uthoff, but they've got guys at every position that can take over a game. And even going into their bench, Bielefeld and OG can take over games. You go down to Iowa's bench, those guys can't take over games. They don't have a ceiling, but they haven't found that out yet. They don't know how to reach that point. And until they do, they will be lower than Iowa on my report card, pending something catastrophic in Iowa City.
Yeah, I mean, I guess second on my report card would be Indiana. I would give probably Iowa just a little bit of a head start above Indiana right now, just because of where they are in the rankings right now. They're a top 3 team, potentially a number 1 seed. Indiana not quite there yet, just because of their schedule, and there's nothing they can do about that. And that's not discrediting Indiana, but right now I got them at number 2, and then at number 3, I got Maryland coming in with a B plus because that game at Michigan without Karis LeVert, I don't know if that's that great of a loss. And if you're a Maryland team that's going to go compete for a national title and you have one of the highest ceilings in the country, you got to be able to win that game, even if it's on the road. And that's why I have them 3rd place with a B plus.
Yeah, I've got Maryland 3rd place as well, but I think they get over that cusp and they get that A- because they have 2 losses in the Big Ten. They're both on the road. One was a 1-possession game in Ann Arbor. I think this was without Karis LeVert. But regardless, it's a road loss at Michigan, which is, not a sensational loss any way you put it. But that other one was to Michigan State, prime time on the road. You're going to lose that 19 times out of 20, I would say. So Maryland with an A- just because they have the talent and they're capable of taking games over late, even if they slack off for 37 minutes. If they're still in it, they can take over and win. We saw that against Northwestern. They slacked off for 38 minutes, came back, closed it out, won in overtime. Michigan State, they couldn't do it, but that was on the road. That was a Michigan State team with Denzel Valentine back. Again, only 2 losses. They're incredibly talented. They're very well-rounded, and I think that they can get it together.
Yeah, I mean, Maryland is one of the best teams in the country. There's no doubt about that. It's just when they get it together and when they start going on their big run. But then next on my list, I have Michigan coming in at a B. 7-3 without Karis LeVert is something to be proud of, I think, because this is a very tough conference. You're missing your very best player, and right now I have them sitting 4th place with a B.
Yeah, below Maryland, I've got Purdue. They're still in the top 20. As down as they seem, they're still in the top 20, and that should speak to how good they can be. They're still capable of making a run this season. Not that far, not as far as Iowa can go, but they're still capable of making a run. That three-headed monster at Big Ben can do a lot of damage in this conference. And right below them, almost a tie. This is going to surprise you. I've got Wisconsin because, like I said, Ethan Happ is really starting to excel, and he's a freshman. And as freshmen play more games, like we're seeing with OG, you can see them get better every game, and that's what Ethan Happ is doing. Again, Nigel Hayes is the man in Madison, and they're figuring it out with this new coach, Greg Gard, with Alpo Ryan. And I think this is the time where they can hit their stride and start winning some games with consistency.
Yeah, and then on my power rankings at the 5 spot, right below Michigan, I have Purdue coming in. Or wait, let me check my notes again. Yeah, I have Purdue coming in at a B-. This team, I think, should be higher up on these power rankings, but they just haven't shown me that they can be that consistent team that we all thought they were going to be in the non-conference slate where they were running over teams, and we were thinking of them as a top 10 team. They haven't shown that in the Big Ten, and I think they need to show that. And then right below Purdue, I have Ohio State also at a B-. This is a team that I didn't think was supposed to be that fantastic this season, but they've shown us that they can stay right in there. And right now, I think they're a 6-14. That's same as Michigan State. So it's showing what Thad Matta can do in Columbus with a team that's not one of his best.
Yeah, and I've got Ohio State right there too. Everything you said is correct. But I can't figure Ohio State out. They may hit their stride soon, but at the same time, you look at their resume. They lost to consecutively Louisiana Tech, Memphis, and the University of Texas Arlington, and then not so far after beat Kentucky. So that speaks for itself. Ohio State can't figure them out. They don't have a D'Angelo Russell anymore. They don't have a guy like Aaron Kraft that can lock down someone, or someone like Russell who can take over a game and score. But again, I can't figure them out. They're well coached and they've got talent, but I can't figure them out because they're just so inconsistent. They slaughter some bad teams and then they let some other bad teams hang around and struggle for like a 6-point victory. So I just don't get it with Ohio State. But that one win against Kentucky keeps them above that C+ range and keeps them at a B-. And then right below them, their rival up north is Michigan. With no LeVert, they've been very, very mediocre. But when he comes back, I think they're very capable of doing more, as we've already covered. And then right below them, just to keep this rolling, to round it out, I've got Michigan State, also a B-. And this was really splitting hairs between Michigan, Ohio State, Michigan State, and even Wisconsin, because Michigan State, like you said, 4 losses in the conference. That's horrible. You could say Denzel Valentine is one of the best players, but again, 4 losses in the conference. Yes, Tom Izzo can get them to figure it out, but they have 4 losses. I can't seem to get over that because something clearly is not going right. It's been a roller coaster season. They seem to have hit their stride with Denzel Valentine back, but at the same time, they lost 3 straight earlier this year. That shouldn't happen. That never happens with them, and it did. So that means that this season could be something that we haven't really seen from Michigan State, and I don't mean that in a good way. So they're not necessarily at the bottom of my top 8, but they're definitely not towards the top. They're definitely in the bottom half, but they're not in the basement. So in the bottom 3, probably Michigan, Ohio State, Michigan State in no order, but Michigan State, they have a lot to prove for me so far.
Yeah, and coming in my 7 spot is Michigan State with a C+. I mean, missing Valentine obviously hurt for some part of the Big Ten schedule, but now with him back, they do have 4 losses, and 4 losses is not going to win you a Big Ten title, and I don't expect them to win out either. So they're going to finish with 5 or 6 losses, maybe even 7 if things go really off the rails. So I mean, it's just kind of where Michigan State is right now. I don't know where they'll be in a couple weeks. It could be up towards the top again, or they could just be where they are, or maybe even fall a little bit. I don't know where this Michigan State team is going. But then in 8th place right now with a C+ right on that cusp, I have Wisconsin. I mean, I didn't expect too much out of this team after Bo Ryan left. Greg Gard has come in. He's done a fine job. Ethan Happ has been a good freshman for them. Nigel Hayes along with Bronson Koenig, those 3 have really been carrying that team, and I have them coming in at the 8th spot. I didn't expect too much more out of Wisconsin than what I've seen so far.
Yeah, and it's been, after Maryland, Indiana, and Iowa, you don't really know what to expect because you could have Ohio State as high as 5, Michigan as high as 5. You could argue, I probably won't listen to you, but you could argue there's something there for that. But you could also have Michigan State as low as we have them, and as most people will probably disagree. Granted, they're ranked 11th in the country at this point. It's not too relevant. They are top 15, but like I said, it's a total roll of the dice once you get past those top 3 teams in Maryland, Iowa, and Indiana. But let us know what you guys think. Download the podcast, listen to it all the way through. If you're listening to this right now, tweet at us to let us know what you think, and we'll engage with you there. We'll talk some Big Ten basketball. We'll talk some IU basketball. But until then, that just about does it for us tonight. This was a nice change in routine, Josh. This was fun. We should do it again. Maybe not next week, just because not a lot of teams are going to play, but later on in the year, towards the end, I like this. We should have another kind of real roundup, and talk about everyone. But next week we'll probably go back to normal, just granted, because this is only 7 days difference, 1 or 2 games for each team.
Yeah, and I mean, in a few weeks we're gonna have a great idea of what teams are contenders and what teams are pretenders. I mean, this is kind of a Big Ten. I mean, you were just talking about after that top 3. I mean, you don't really know what you're gonna see. So it'll be interesting. But no, this was definitely a great show. But because it is Super Bowl week, I got to get your Super Bowl prediction right now.
Oh, man. Wow. You put me on the spot there. Well, I mean, it goes without saying that this is legend versus up-and-comer. And you never bet against Peyton Manning. But at this point, you can't really bet against Cam Newton. I mean, the guy's a superstar. He can do it all. He's doing it with Greg Olsen and Jericho Cotchery as 2 of his top guys. I mean, Manning's, yes, he boasts the best defense in the league, but he's been inconsistent. His time's almost up. He's ailing a little bit. I just think Cam Newton is the Troy Williams, if you will, if you want to be Tom Crean. He's a Swiss Army knife. He can do it all. He can catch the ball. He can run a route. He can run the ball. He can throw it however far he wants or needs to throw it. So I like the Panthers, and the spread right now, I believe, is 6. I think if the Panthers win, it's by a touchdown. I don't think this comes down to a last-second field goal. I think the Panthers can control this game for the majority. And I like Cam Newton in Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, you said that, and they beat my Seahawks and all that. But I'm gonna go with Peyton Manning, the sheriff as they call him. Final score 24-20. So I'm picking the Broncos all out to win. I just like what Peyton Manning's doing. But so that's on Sunday. But before that, as a little appetizer, tune into Indiana Penn State on BTN, 8 o'clock Eastern on Saturday night. There's a lot of good Big Ten basketball this weekend, as we were talking about. So definitely watch basketball. Tweet at us. I'm always on Twitter, I feel like. So I'll definitely see whatever you're telling me. It should be a really fun weekend. Saturday's going to be fun, and then next week we got Iowa coming to town, but we'll break that down on our show next week. Don't forget to tune in to the post-game show and the halftime report during the Penn State game. But for Michael, I'm Josh. Good night, and go Hoosiers.